So we are honored to introduce Dr. Alan Barnard. Dr. Alan Barnard is an entrepreneur, research scientist, app developer, author, and speaker. Dr. Barnard is the CEO and founder of the Goldratt Research Labs, a firm dedicated to partnering with leading public and private sector organizations around the world to help them achieve more with less in less time. He works as a strategy advisor, researcher, and theory of constraint expert and educator with both Fortune 500 companies as well as NGOs and government agencies. Most recently, Dr. Alan Barnard has been working as the chief architect of the range of award-winning Harmony decision support apps, all designed to help managers and individuals make better, faster decisions and learn faster from their past decision mistakes, both in their organizations and within their own lives. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Alan Barnard.
Good morning, everyone. It is an absolutely great honor and privilege to be here this morning. Thank you so much to the leadership team of Success for All for the invitation. What I'd like to do this morning is to share with you the research that I've done, the research insights that I've gained, and specifically the personal story that led to these. Is something that I've been always curious about is why do some people become successful, sometimes despite incredible obstacles that they've faced, and despite many setbacks that they've achieved. It's something that I turned into a career. I became extremely curious about specifically why good people make and often repeat bad decisions, and specifically those limiting assumptions and beliefs behind those bad decisions. So, just a brief background about the title of my presentation today. It's impossible unless. And my focus is to share with you a very exciting development that we've been working on for a long time, which is it possible to create an app that can help people, and specifically young people, improve their well-being, improve their state of mind, improve their performance, by helping them make better, faster decisions and choices when it really matters. We make about 35,000 decisions every single day. Most of those are not important. But there are a few that are. Getting those right or wrong could be the difference between success and not. I want to tell you quickly a personal story of how I got here. So here's me at about 10 years old. I'm a serial entrepreneur. We grew up with very little resources, so it was very clear. If you wanted to buy anything for yourself in life, you had to earn the money. So I was doing everything I can, washing cars, doing gardening. I discovered outsourcing until it got me into real trouble. So I was being paid for the gardens, and then I realized I can do many more gardens if I get other kids to do the work for me. I just collect the money, I pay them a little bit, and I keep the rest to myself. And then the parents found out, and I got into big trouble. I was delivering newspapers. I was a pretty happy kid. Pretty media in terms of academic results. And then we wrote this strange test at our primary school. And about a month later, myself and one of my best friends were called out onto the stage together with a group of other 10 kids. We were the only kids that didn't belong. All the other kids were the bright kids in the room. And suddenly they told us that we were gifted and we're going to go to a gifted school in the afternoons. When they said computers, that's all we needed to hear. Because as long as we could be playing around with computers, we didn't care about what it was called. What was interesting was almost immediately our results went up. And we could hear our teachers and parents talk to each other and saying, oh, they weren't stimulated enough in the classroom. That's probably what's happening here. About 3 months later, there's an announcement over the intercom. Principal calls my best friend to the principal's office. About an hour later, comes back in absolute tears. Now we're 10 years old. What happened? He said that the principal told him that there was a mistake in his test and that he's not really gifted. And you just think, like, even as a 10-year-old, I thought, that just sucks. I mean, the kid is happy, he's doing well, you know. And almost immediately his marks started going down. And that intrigued me until I read a beautiful quote from Henry Ford. And Henry Ford said, whether you believe or think you can or can't, you're right. And then I had a personal experience where I went into high school. We had to write an entrance exam. I was called into the principal's office because I was doing the best in my primary school, and suddenly said, we don't know what happened. Maybe you've just been lucky up to now, but actually your marks isn't great. You're in the D class, D for dummies. Of course, I resisted and fought and said, there must be a mistake. And I said, no, that's it. And almost immediately, my own marks started going down. And then I remembered this insight that I had, and I thought, what if this is true? What if somehow what you believe about your own potential can have an impact? Not in some magical way that the universe rewards you by thinking positively, but by a very practical way, that when you believe it, you'll have the energy and the motivation to go and try it. And that's what happened. I ended up performing really well at high school, highest marks in the school, became head boy and junior mayor, which was really, really amazing. I had this big chain and I could drive with the mayor's car. It was pretty cool. And then ended up going and finishing my degree and later on my PhD. But this was a really insightful moment for me, because what I realized, suddenly I had a life goal. I wanted to find out what are the type of assumptions that can limit us, those self-limiting assumptions or beliefs, and more practically, can we find a way of discovering it ourselves? Rather than spending maybe 5 years with a psychologist or even psychiatrist, is there a way, a systematic way, that we can find and overcome self-limiting beliefs or assumptions? Simple enough that we can teach anybody, including kids. Or maybe I should have said, including CEOs. So this is the essence of the research, is how do we find these limiting assumptions, and how can you get yourself to challenge them? And that's no easy feat, because our minds is set up to prove our beliefs and assumptions. It's really hard to disprove yourself. You believe something and then you justify it. You go and seek out the people that will confirm what you've already believed. You don't go and seek out people that disagree with you. So it's a really hard challenge to find a way of practically challenging yourself. So I started investigating the relationship between well-being and decision-making. Probably many of you have heard of Dr. Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology. He said if you are trying to measure the well-being of a person, the way that they flourish in life, there's 5 elements that make up that. The positive emotion side, the level of engagement or how often we get into flow, the relationship side, how much of what we do has meaning for us, and lastly, getting a sense of achievement. So a sense of achievement is a hobbies that we do, playing golf, maybe playing Fortnite. The kids, I've got 2 boys, 11 and 12, they're into that. Each of those involve making certain decisions in our life, and those decisions can have a big impact. As I mentioned, we make many decisions, most of them are not important, but there are a few are. So I was curious about how we actually make decisions, and Nobel Prize winner Dr. Daniel Kahneman came up with a beautifully simple explanation of how we think. He said there's just 2 systems. System 1, fast and automatic, and most of our decisions are made there, even though we don't like to admit it. What we wear, what we eat, which route we take, we are basically in fully automatic mode. Then there's system 2, which is the more slow and deliberate system. We really don't like to engage that because it's hard work to think. If you've taught kids, they'll find any excuse not to sit down and think. We are exactly the same. It takes an incredible amount of brain power to actually think through things. But what do I have in common, these things? And what we realize is that there's some kind of scarce resource that's causing us that if we spend too much of our effort on one of those elements, maybe too much effort on Fortnite, we're sacrificing something else. And what was the scarce resource? So could it be lack of knowledge or information, or money, wisdom, courage, time? All of those are resources that I'm sure all of us would love to have more of it. They are kind of weak links in our chain of events. But the question is, are they the weakest link? What's the real bottleneck that's blocking us from achieving much more in life? Is there something that's scarcer than any of these resources? And this was something that we had asked ourselves in big business, but also started asking ourselves at the individual level. And we found out that there's only one resource that qualifies for the definition that the demand on that resource will always exceed its availability, its available capacity. I want you to do a thought experiment with me just quickly. Think about all the things that demand your attention or could benefit from your attention every day. Do you picture that list? Is it quite long? Right. Now think about your available attention. And attention, one practical definition of attention is undistracted time. It's a time we have every day to make progress on those goals that are most important to us. And what you'll find if you are like most of us, the things that demand our attention will always exceed our available attention. Our attention is our bottleneck. And what and who we pay attention to makes all the difference. And that's the relationship between decision making and scarce resources. Is what and who we pay attention to, and as important, what and who we don't pay attention to can make all the difference that determines somebody's success or not in life. So what makes up that gap? Where do we lose attention? So we started looking at the decisions we make and which of the decisions that consumes our attention. When we make mistakes, it's simply unavoidable. An unavoidable mistake is if you are responsible for forecasting the weather, you're going to be making mistakes. If you're responsible for forecasting how much revenue the organization will do, you will make mistakes. But there's a lot of the decision mistakes that we make that are both avoidable and consequential. And what's very interesting is as knowledge improves over time, ignorance is becoming smaller and smaller as a reason why we don't do the right things or why we do the wrong things. Up to a couple of decades ago, medicine was in that field. We really didn't know what was the cause of disease or what was the best treatment or the right dosage. But today, most of those questions are answered. So when we see somebody that has not been diagnosed properly or identified the right treatment, mostly it's because of inertia and ineptitude. So ignorance is, I didn't know. Inertia is, I knew, but I didn't act on that knowledge. So think about somebody that smokes. Do you really think it's because they don't know that it's bad for them? What do you think? It's like this joke where the guy walks into the restaurant and he's sitting down and there's this woman smoking and he walks up to her and he says, "Excuse me, ma'am, your smoking is bothering me." And she looks at him in disgust and says, "Bothering you? It's killing me." Right? Most of the time it's not ignorance, but we love solving problems as if it's ignorance. So we put big warnings on the outside of the packages, as if the person that is smoking doesn't know that it's bad for them and wants to be constantly reminded. Of course, there are some people that are ignorant, but it's a very small percentage. So what we started focusing on is what's behind the other two reasons. Inertia, I knew, but I did nothing. Medical practitioners, why don't they always wash their hands? Because they don't know about it, how bad it is. And if we catch them, we just educate them more. Does that really help? There's been interesting research done in many schools where when you are launching an education program to address some bad behavior, the bad behavior increases. So it can't be ignorance. Ineptitude is, I knew, I did something, but I compromised. I didn't apply the knowledge correctly. And that's the areas that we were focusing on, is to find out why do we make so many of these mistakes? And the answer was in decision fatigue. What I'd like you to imagine is that the horizontal axis is the percentage that a resource, in this case you, are busy. What happens to the time it takes you to complete tasks? Say you had a task that normally you could easily complete in a day. How long will it take you as the utilization or your busyness increases? An interesting piece of research that we did was looking at how long a one-day task takes somebody. At 50% utilization or busyness, it takes 1 day. At 75%, it takes 3 days. Because that 25% that's remaining is actually the time that you're going to be spending. So 3 days is waiting, 1 day is actually working on it, right? That's where the 75% comes from. At 90%, that same one-day task is taking us 9 days. But look at what happens when we get close to being fully utilized. When that demand exceeds our available attention. That same one-day task can take us 99 days. But as you approach 100% utilization, it means that the queue of things waiting for you on that long list starts increasing exponentially. Right? So this is kind of capturing that balance between how long the task is waiting for you to pay attention to it versus how long it takes you to finally do it. It's like with writing the book. My first book, 3 years, still not finished. If I had to estimate how long a book would take, what would I say? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? Right. It's because I'm in this mode where I'm not giving it my full attention. What's very interesting is as you approach this 100%, your ability to make reliable commitments, how long will it take me to complete my homework or to complete this project, also exponentially decays to basically zero, which means that if you're in that right-hand zone, there's no way you can make any reliable commitments. So when your students fail on their commitments, guess where they are? If you fail on your commitments, guess where you are? Also, the output initially starts climbing as we get more and more tasks on our list. But then it hits this sort of plateau level, and if we keep overloading ourselves beyond that threshold, even our output drops down. This right-hand zone is called chaos. It's not a nice place to be. We are completely overwhelmed. We just don't have enough capacity to catch up, to deal with the randomness of the type of tasks that's coming onto our to-do list. Our students are in the same position. Executives and managers and companies are in exactly the same position. And what do we think the solution is? Prioritization. Something to remember is prioritization just changes the sequence in the queue, in the backlog. It doesn't shorten the backlog. We get overwhelmed because the backlog is too long. And that's why often these things take so much longer. If you think specifically about decision making, how long do you think it takes you to make a decision? If you had everything that you need? A couple of hours with deliberation? How long do we carry these things with us? Facing a really hard decision. I call it an impossible decision, not when the decision is impossible to make, but when there's two conditions. We have two options that we have to decide on, change or not change, or change to A, change to B. And both of these not only have unique pros, but they also have significant and unique downsides. How do I make a decision when there's a big downside in both situations? A recent case, if you think about these Boeing 737 Maxes that went down, imagine yourself being in the position of the airline CEO. When do you ground your fleet? There's clearly a downside if you don't do it. But if you do it, it could potentially bankrupt your airline. What do you do? Right? What do you do if you're in a relationship where you really realized, even though you did all the checking of social media ahead of time and you got married and initially you were so happy, suddenly you'll find yourself stuck in a relationship that's not working out. What do? There's a downside of both getting a divorce and not getting a divorce. There's a downside of quitting your job and staying in the job. Those are impossible decisions, both when all options have big downsides that we don't want to live with, or that we can't accurately predict what's going to happen. We'll have to wait and see. So where do you think you are on this curve? And where do you think your students are? And what can you do to help yourself get out and to help them? The bad news is you can get in there very quickly. Just a small increase in demand that goes over that threshold of how many balls you can juggle will put you straight into chaos. Suddenly you feel completely overwhelmed, out of control. You know you can't make any reliable commitments, and yet everybody's knocking and saying, when will you have this done by? And you try your best, and all that you know is things are taking longer, you're getting less done. So there's a kind of a relationship. Whenever we see a backlog, it means that there's a bottleneck in the system. But resources don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to be a bottleneck, right? So how did they become a bottleneck? There was some bad decision that took place that made them a bottleneck. We either overcommitted that resource capacity, or we ended up causing it to do stuff that it shouldn't be doing. And of course, below the bad decision, there's a bad assumption. And those are the ones that we're interested to find out. What are these limiting assumptions or beliefs that can cause any of us to make and often repeat a bad decision, and then as a result, makes it appear as if we don't have enough resources to set and achieve very ambitious targets. So how do we start? And this was a really interesting question that we had. So if we want to create a sort of a fast track, or as the kids talk about it today, a hack, to quickly come up with these limiting assumptions or beliefs, we started looking at what if we just started with the things that are bothering us. And two types of things that bother us. We do things that we probably know we shouldn't, and at the same time we don't do the things that we probably know we should. And these are dark clouds that follow us around. So what we were looking for, in a sense, is can we find the silver lining in these dark clouds? Because previously, it's so simple. You do an analysis, you pick up one or both of those types of problem, you just tell them, stop doing this, start doing that. As if the problem is ignorance, right? People overspend, not because they know it's bad for them. We don't save enough, not because we don't know it's bad for us if we don't, and that the earlier that we start, the better it is. There's something else going on that's causing the inertia or the ineptitude. And that's what we wanted to find out. Can we come up with a very simple process that can allow anybody to discover that? So we created a storyline. The storyline dates back to about mid-1990s. Dr. Ellie Goldratt, that was one of my mentors and a creator of Theory of Constraints. We were one day looking at why do people resist change? People are good. People want to do good things. Why would they resist change? And what we realized is that there could be one of four elements that could be influencing the way that we judge whether a change is a good thing for us in our organization or for the people that we care about or not. So imagine this little young guy, Peter Pan, is sitting there, and he's got a big challenge on his hand. He has to make a decision whether to climb this mountain or not. There's two compelling reasons to climb it. There's a pot of gold right at the top, and there's a very nasty alligator at the bottom. Right? Either of those two are enough to get him to want to run up the mountain. But there's also two compelling reasons not to do it. The first one is there's this beautiful mermaid at the base that he loves so much, and he doesn't want to leave her behind, and unfortunately she is a little bit heavy and he can't carry her up the mountain. It would be useful if she had legs at this moment. But there's another compelling reason not to climb, which is represented by these two crutches. And the one crutch represents the effort we have to make to climb the mountain, the effort we have to make to quit a bad habit, the effort we have to make to set and achieve ambitious targets when everybody else is resisting it. But there's also the second crutch, which is what if we fell down and broke our leg or even our neck? And what we realize is that these four elements is essentially the assumptions or beliefs we have about making changes in our life or organization. And it's a practical way of exposing these often hidden assumptions or beliefs. So what we did was we created a very simple process that says, step one, start with any dark cloud that you're facing. Any problem or opportunity that's putting pressure on you to make a change. I'm being bullied at school. My grades are too low. I'm not getting enough work done. I'm not climbing up the corporate ladder as fast as I expected. I'm now in my middle years, and all those ambitious goals I set for myself, I haven't achieved them. And this is following me like a dark cloud. To make sure that you are not wasting your time on something that's unimportant, we ask two simple questions. Why is this problem bad for you if you don't resolve it? And why is it bad for others, the people that you care about, your organization, if you don't resolve it? Once they tick off those boxes, we know that we're now dealing with a really dark cloud that's worthwhile investing some of their limited attention on to resolve it. What we then ask them to do is to fill in this little diagram. I call it a ProConCloud. It's kind of like a Procon list, but a dual one. We are not looking just at the pros and cons of making the change, which in this case is climbing the mountain, but we are also looking at the pros and cons of not making the change. So we're looking at the pot of gold, the mermaid, the crutches, as well as the alligator. What's very interesting from the structures, we then put a goal at the top, and this is whatever your goal is, to be happy, healthy, maybe even wealthy. And at the bottom, your threat, the things that you fear most in life. And we can use those as a way of whatever you've written in those boxes, check that it's really important enough for you. If not, take it out. It's just a distraction. So all the things that you've listed as a pot of gold, are they really important to you? And what is interesting, which comes out of the structure, is that if we're trying to understand why somebody is procrastinating, why we are procrastinating, it's normally because of an exaggerated fear of loss, losing the mermaid, or an exaggerated fear of effort or risk, gaining the crutches. Think about somebody that is facing the decision about whether to stop smoking or not to stop, the no change part. What is the positive for them of not stopping? First of all, there must be a positive, else they would have stopped a long time ago, right? They might say that it's to deal with my stress. And as long as stopping smoking will get me or force me to give up this way of coping with stress, it's not a viable option for me. I can't do it. It's impossible. At the same time, what do you think they would say is the negative of stopping? Maybe that I will gain weight. And as a result, the change is not a viable option. The only way we can make it viable is to ask them what they can add so that they don't have to give up the mermaid, so that they can still have a way of coping with stress. Maybe they start exercising. And secondly, what they can add to ensure that they don't have to live with the crutches, which is gaining weight or maybe failing at their efforts, etc. And that's a way of making a decision that suddenly felt impossible because there was a big downside. I don't want to lose the mermaid or gain the crutches, into something that becomes a viable option. The other side is if we want to try to understand why we often overreact or why somebody is overreacting. We go on a crash diet, we lose our temper, right? Why is that? Typically because of an exaggerated frustration. The crocodile, we make it feel much bigger than what it really is. Suddenly, because he's not picking up his socks, this is now a disaster to all the guys out there. Or we've got an exaggerated pot of gold. We think the grass is green on the other side. So if you're curious to understand why you or somebody else is often overreacting and making changes or choices that they probably know rationally is bad for them, those are the assumptions or beliefs that really pop up that you can check and challenge. And then what we did was we said, great, what we know is the current way of resolving this type of decision dilemmas is that we teach people to compromise. You have to give up something to gain something. And that's horrible because we know from studying decision making today that we hate giving up stuff. In fact, we value losses, equivalent losses, much, much greater than equivalent gains. And our discovery here was to kind of create new options, is rather than asking somebody to give up something, ask them what they can add to their idea. But to make it objective, we asked them to look at 4 options that they previously didn't consider. The first 2 options are sort of mirror images of itself. It says option change plus. I'm still planning to make the change. I'm still planning to quit smoking. But what can I add so I don't have to give up my stress coping mechanism and I don't have to face the risk of gaining weight? Then we say, what about the other side? You have to be objective. Maybe the best option is to not change at this moment, but just add something small to it. Maybe we are facing the decision between getting the new iPhone versus keeping my old iPhone, right? What can I add to keeping my old iPhone that will give me most of the pot of gold? Maybe I can get a new cover because the pot of gold was that I look cool with the phone, or that the thing is crashing so much it's become a real frustration to use it. Maybe I can upgrade my software and that will allow me to achieve both objectives. So that's what the change plus option is about, is getting ourselves and the kids to think, what can I add to make the status quo a viable option? And the other 2 is what I call when and when not to change, or change and not change, is to think under what conditions should I change versus under what conditions should I not. And this is very interesting, especially in highly traumatic cases. Somebody that's facing abuse or neglect, and they're stuck there and they don't know how to get out. And essentially what you're trying to do here with option number 3 is, what's the condition under which you definitely have to go? Or what's the condition under which you definitely have to upgrade your phone or upgrade your IT system? So when plus when not. And normally the resolution of that is, as long as the following is true, we don't change. As soon as this happens, we change. When we make these discoveries, it resolves the inconsistency and disharmony we have in our mind. And then the last one is a bit of fun, which is, we just simply call it another change. To say, now that you really know what you want, which is the pot of gold and a mermaid, and you really know what you don't want, which is the crutches and the alligator, is there any other way that can help you achieve that? So for example, it was between implementing a new IT system versus keeping my old legacy system. Another change could be to outsource the whole thing. And what's fascinating when we started testing this is we now have CEOs of Fortune 500 companies talking about, what's your mermaid, what's your pot of gold, what's your crutches, what's your alligator. It gives people a common language to talk about assumptions or beliefs that were previously buried quite deep within them, but was influencing every single day the way that they were making decisions. So in the app itself and the process itself, it's a 5-step process, and we've designed every step to prevent a common decision mistake. I remember interviewing one of these guys, and the agent was so frustrated. His wife and kids were there. They said he was, he got caught twice, went to jail twice, came out, said enough is enough, went through this program, we're making fantastic progress, got a great job in a body shop, working with cars that he loves, and then he stole a truck. And I said, dude, what happened? He said, I don't know. I said, come on, there must be a good reason why you did it, so think. And he thought about it and he said, do you know how it made me feel to drive past the beach with all the young girls sitting there? I had the music playing in this truck as if it was my truck. It was the first time in my life that I felt that I mattered, that people were seeing me. Now, the guy's going to go to jail for 10 years because he made this bad decision. And you think, is that fair? Right? And then we asked him, what's the crutches? What would have been the effort to have resisted that temptation and all the work? And what was amazing was he said he was reading all these self-help books, And now that he thinks back about it, maybe he was being conditioned in a certain way, because all these self-help books say, you know, sometimes you're given opportunities and you just have to go for it. It's all about speed of implementation, right? And he said probably at that moment he was saying, what would the other guys think of me? I'm sitting in a truck, I've got the key. Like, why don't I just take it, right? But it was fascinating because within 10, 15 minutes, he had deep insight about what was happening in his own mind that could have caused him to make a really bad decision. And then, of course, we also ask, who do you blame? Do you blame anybody? Do you blame yourself? What did you do that caused the problem? Or maybe one of the people that I interviewed blamed his mum for calling the police when she found drugs in his closet. I said, okay, makes sense. So she found drugs in your closet. She phoned the police, you got arrested. That's the problem. Yes. I said, what did you want her to do? Not to phone the police. I'm her son. I said, okay, let's see. Let's put ourselves in her mind. She must have had a good reason. Can you fill in the rest of the diagram? And he got halfway through and the tears were running down his face. Because he's realized that his mum did it because she loved him. So to us, this was really, really encouraging, is to see how a very simple process can help somebody very quickly uncover limiting assumptions or beliefs that could have caused them to be in a vicious cycle of making and often repeating bad decisions. And whether it's a life decision or a decision about your business and what do you do to best grow the business or to make it sustainable or viable, the diagram works in all the cases. And as I mentioned, you can very quickly read off, once you've got this ProConCloud filled in, what would be the assumptions I need to challenge if I wanted to make sure I don't overreact? Could it be that I've exaggerated the alligator or the pot of gold? What's the assumptions that I should be checking to understand why me or somebody else is resisting making a good change? Could it be that I've exaggerated the mermaid or the crutches? So we've tested across many different industries, Fortune 500 companies, small businesses, then in public sector. We did workshops in Africa with cities that are encountering massive problems with solid waste. The solid waste is piling up. The demand just exceeds the available supply. And we had every stakeholder do their own ProConCloud to say, what's blocking you from contributing to closing the gap between the demand versus the supply? And after just a few days, we had detailed action plans, people going away, and they realized it's not to blame. Everybody put their own ProConCloud down, but also the one that they blamed, right? So the ones that are not being paid, they blame the citizens for not paying. They said, fine, put yourself in their shoes. What do you want them to do? To pay. What are they currently doing? No, not pay. Okay, why? And they came up with brilliant breakthroughs of how you could swap effort for payment. How communities can suddenly work together to help those that can afford it and those that can't. And then, of course, with individuals. So how does the app work? I'll quickly show you. You open up the app, you register, it's a free app. The first question that you get is, what problem do you face? You simply type it in, or you can use the dictate function and it types it in automatically. And you keep on answering the questions. Why is this bad for you? Why is it bad for the people that you care about? What's the options that you've got? What change do you feel pressure to make to address this? Stop drinking, continue drinking. What's the unique pluses and minuses of each of those? And what is the goal that you're trying to achieve and the thing that you're most scared of? And then Harmony, our virtual advisor, pauses you, helps you to slow down your thinking a little bit, and then highlight some insights to say, if you are interested to know why you might overreact or what's the reasons you are giving yourself for making this change, that's where you should be looking. If you're worried that you might be overreacting and leaving your job or leaving your partner, that it will end up being a big mistake, those are probably the assumptions or beliefs you should check and challenge. Are they really true? And then if you are worried about procrastinating further, you still haven't decided which university to go to, you still haven't decided whether to get married or start with a family, and this is starting to bother you, it's hanging over you like a dark cloud, whatever you've written in those boxes about the mermaid and the crutches is probably the reasons you've given yourself subconsciously. And if you want to make a change, those are the ones that you should challenge. What the app also allows us to do is to track progress. So as soon as you've finished your analysis, you can actually track progress to see where you are in the status, not started, in progress, completed or achieved. You can also see if you have not yet completed your analysis, and you can share this analysis with friends, with colleagues, with teachers, with coaches, so that they can see where you are and where you got stuck, so that they can be proactive in terms of helping you. And with the kids' help, we also developed a messenger UI. Some of them loved the idea of filling in the graphical boxes, but many of them didn't like that. And I said, can't you just give us like questions and answers like we were doing WhatsApp or Messenger? I said, of course we can. So now we have a messenger UI that will very quickly help you to focus. So I'll use the last few minutes I've got just to show you a little video about how Keaton was using this diagram to try and understand why he was being bullied at school and what he could do about it. So we provided this template for them, and they simply used the app to fill it in. What was very interesting about Keaton, he was very clear who was to blame. It was Jake, the kid that was bullying him. But he struggled to fill in some of the boxes, as you can imagine. What's the positive for Jake of doing it? And what's the negative if he stopped? And then the teacher very cleverly asked him a question. Have you ever bullied anybody? I know you have a younger brother. What if we spoke to him? Have you ever bullied him? Yes. So why do you do it? There must be a good reason. And it was fascinating because out of this little bit of research, what we discovered is that these kids often learn the wrong lessons from traumatic events. They learn, do it to them before they do it to you. Or do it to yourself before they do it to you. If they're going to make fun of your big ears, make fun of them yourself. Sometimes it works really well. The guy becomes a comedian. But sometimes it becomes really self-harming. So we've been really, really amazed at the type of insights that we can generate. And how we partner now is we offer an opportunity to organizations, not-for-profit organizations typically, to partner with us to gain insights into some unique problem that they're experiencing within their environment, either overspending, not saving enough. We've partnered with the Noakes Foundation in South Africa studying people that are overweight, saying that a couple of years back, we could really say that it was ignorance. We didn't know the damaging effect that carbs and sugar have on us. But now we know, and yet most people keep on consuming by far too much carbs and sugar. Why is that? So we partner with them. We send out a letter to ask for volunteers. They get a little tutorial video to show them how the method and the app works. They complete it, and then they send it in, and a research team can then have a look at that to see what are the mermaids and pot of golds and alligators and crutches that are coming up, and is there something that we can do proactively, working with them to see if we can take action. So in terms of future partnership objectives, it'll be a wonderful opportunity to work with Success for All. With the kids, we've learned so much. We've only done very small pilots, and yet we've seen tremendous insight. Specifically around these kids give us brutally honest feedback. So it's helped us to make the app even simpler and faster. And we'd love to partner with you to get more kids to try it out and give their feedback to us. We want to make it cool to start sharing your real life. Everybody knows that on social media, we share our best life. That's not our real life. And we've created a little video that I'll end off with to show how we are trying to encourage kids to start downloading the app. It's for free, and to start using it to analyze the big dark clouds that they're facing, make better decisions in their life. But also, if they get stuck, they can reach out and see other kids in our community library that have shared their examples. How did they get unstuck? So I'll quickly play the video, and then we have, I think, 5 minutes or so for questions that we'll end up with.
What will people see when they look at your social media? Your best life or your real life? Most of us share only our best life, the amazing places we visit and people we meet, and moments when we look and feel our best. But that is not our real life. No matter how popular or wealthy you are or aren't, in our real lives, we also have real problems. Sometimes we feel pressure to do things we don't want to do. We get bullied, made to feel like we're not good enough, and many of us struggle to quit bad habits or deal with traumatic events in our lives. And then there are all the decisions you face every day. What to wear, what to eat, who to date, what university to apply to, what career to choose, and how do I live up to my own and others' expectations of me? The many challenges and decisions that demand our attention every day can be quite overwhelming. They can feel like dark clouds that build up over your head and block out the sunshine from your life. Here's the kicker. Most of the many decisions you have to make are not important, but a few are. Getting these important ones right or wrong could be the difference between success and failure. Imagine an app that can help you do exactly that. Help you make better, faster decisions, but only when it really matters. An app designed based on a very simple idea. Every dark cloud has a silver lining. An app that not only helps you identify which of your dark clouds are really important and which are not, but it also guides you through a few simple steps to find the silver lining, discovering limiting beliefs blocking you from finding options that have the most pros and the fewest cons, to evaporate your darkest clouds. And if you do get stuck, your own personal virtual advisor, available 24/7, will be there to offer suggestions and insights on how to get unstuck. The best part? Because your advisor's virtual, you will never have to worry about feeling judged. And if you are still stuck, you can even find and learn from other app users around the world who faced a similar issue to see how they overcame it. An app that allows you to collaborate with your peers, share your analysis and progress, both privately or publicly, so we can learn from each other. What if we told you this app already exists? The Harmony Decision Maker. Download it from your App Store today and make better, faster decisions when it really matters.
So we have a new version that has just been released, so it's available on Android, on the iOS, for the iPhones, as well as Amazon devices. And it would mean the world to me if you would download it and try it out, and please give us feedback. We're trying to continuously improve this app, make it simpler, better, faster, because if it's not, nobody's going to use it. It's for free, so it gives you the opportunity to do one full analysis. There is a subscription if you want to do more than that, but we try to keep it very affordable. It's around $2-3 a month. So I'll open up for any questions. I think just as a summary, the big breakthrough in my own life was realizing that these dark clouds really have silver linings. That when we sit down and we take the time to slow down our thinking, get ourselves out of this fully automatic mode, and analyze these dark clouds, they can give us the key to discover limiting assumptions or beliefs. And once we have them, our mind goes into problem-solving mode. If we provide people with a simple, structured approach on how to do it, they can overcome their own dark clouds. Thank you very much for the kind attention.